the dollar weakness hasn't been quite as extreme as what was predicted at the start of the year. There were a number of people quoted over the last few years saying that the pound now trades a little bit like an emerging market currency. So effectively what we're looking for now is that next stimulus or that next kicker to give us another leg higher. You could argue that the UK has sort of lagged behind the European Union and the States in terms of the amount of stimulus that's been injected into the economy.
And it does feel like we've just been sitting here just waiting for something to happen.
It's sort of a race between the nations at the moment.
So I thought I'd do something a little bit different today. You'll know me, or you'll have stumbled across this podcast because I'm the one that writes the morning reports, or the vast majority of the morning reports, and therefore have an opinion that you'll be aware of, and probably quite a narrow focus on my opinion being the gospel, despite how many times I get it wrong. So what I wanted to do was just invite a colleague to have a chat. This is Dan Quigley. Dan's one of our senior traders and a structured product expert. And we do have some good back and forth on the markets. So he doesn't know what I'm going to ask him at the moment. So I just thought I'd put him on the spot and see where we go. So Dan, getting straight into it, you obviously, and people have worked this out from the accent, New Zealander living in London. You've been here long enough to know exactly what's gone on with Brexit. And we've seen a bit of a sterling recovery, but we haven't seen it go off to the races yet. Or I don't think we have anyway. Have you got a view on the pound and what's going on and why we aren't at 120 on sterling euro, 160 on the dollar?
Yeah, hey Mark, thanks for having me along. Look, I think all in all the pound's had a relatively good time of it since late last year, and we have seen a fair bit of good news priced into the currency across the board. But consensus, like you say, was if we got a Brexit deal done, we were going to see 145 plus against the dollar and potentially 120s against the euro again. I think there's probably a couple of key reasons for that. At the moment, well, for one, on the other side of the equation, the dollar weakness hasn't been quite as extreme as what was predicted at the start of the year. So that's kept a little bit of a cap on the pound rallying significantly against the dollar. And there's still plenty of uncertainty out there in the rest of the world at the moment. There were a number of people quoted over the last few years saying that the pound now trades a little bit like an emerging market currency. Sure. So as long as there's risk out there globally, that could keep a little bit of a lid on things. But like I say, we have had a pretty decent move regardless of that, and a lot of that happened late last year as expectations of a Brexit deal came to fruition. And you could argue that there is actually a lot of good news already priced into the currency. Mm-hmm. So effectively what we're looking for now is that next stimulus or that next kicker to give us another leg higher.
Yeah. Do you think the government's got enough money left in the coffers or enough IOUs to be able to give us a stimulus and a kicker in the domestic economy?
Well, I mean, that's a big question, and you could argue that the UK has sort of lagged behind the European Union and the States in terms of the amount of stimulus that's been injected into the economy. Perhaps that's another reason why we haven't seen things head off to the races to quite the same extent, and that's reflected in UK equity markets as well, which haven't quite had the same pickup that we saw.
Yeah, I mean that's amazing, isn't it? I was writing a piece this morning on Netflix has lost 15% overnight, but it's still 30% up. And if you look at the S&P 500, it's so much higher than any of the UK markets at all. And it does feel like we've just been sitting here, just waiting for something to happen. Do you think the S&P and the US or global markets have to come down in order for the UK to catch up, or can we light a fire somehow and start getting back up there?
I don't think that they necessarily have to come down. I think that we probably haven't quite caught up to the level that we thought we would pre-Brexit, but potentially there's some more good news to come there that could see us outperform. But look, I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to be it's sort of a race between the nations at the moment in terms of who gets this rollout and this reopening right. And at the moment, touch wood, we seem to be doing okay. But I mean, look, there are, consensus, as we've said, is that the pound will be well supported, but there's some serious risks still out there at the moment. I know one that we spoke about recently was the Scottish election coming up next month, and whether or not that is actually a risk for the pound or not.
Yeah, I think I see that as it inevitably will lead to a risk, because Boris is going to find himself with a Scottish government that is overwhelmingly in favour of a second referendum. So public opinion is going to almost force his hand for that. But if we know that's going to happen, but it's not going to happen for a couple of years, and we're probably bored senseless from the UK public's perspective on going through political campaigns and referendum based on what we've been through for the last 4.5 years, I think that risk turns up on the doorstep a few weeks before the referendum. And I think the campaigning of that is going to be so different to how we saw Brexit. Brexit was a battle bus and an empty slogan, turned out to be an empty slogan anyway, that a lot of people, they won the hearts and minds. And I think this time round, people are going to be looking at the balance sheets and the realities of what that vote means for the decades and of the rest of their lives and their kids' lives, rather than trying to make such an emotive decision. I'm saying that obviously with a very English accent, and I haven't got much of an idea what it's like north of the border for that. But I just think from a market perspective, that risk starts to play out much closer to the time, and it's just an inevitability, really.
I read recently that there was a survey taken by the S&P a few years ago in terms of where they would see the Scottish economy as an independent nation by 2025, and they said that there's they would expect to be running at 9% or 9.9% deficit of GDP, 9.9% of GDP. I think the international sort of standard of you're okay is about 3%.
Wow.
So, I mean, in your view, do you think that Scotland leaving would be a bad thing for the rest of the UK?
Well, absolutely. Candidly, I think it's we are a union. We've built the sort of the economic power that we've got collectively now. Obviously, a lot of that is weighted into what is modern day economics and London and the southeast. But the reality is we're definitely stronger as a nation. So, not that I will be campaigning, but I think I would be looking much more closely at the numbers, and hopefully I'll be in a position where I can write about the numbers and say, look, Scotland, really do think about this as well. I think I've probably got 4 or 5 readers north of the border, so we'll have a look and see. Changing topics slightly, and I want to cover just one more before we go on there, and this is really about government spending as well. The US, Biden, green recovery. Does he do it? Does he get the money in? Does the money get well spent? And does that mean that they kick the can down the road of this just ever burgeoning deficit because they've got some decent headline growth numbers, or does it come back and bite them sooner rather than later?
Well, I mean, it seems since the election that he's had a pretty easy time of it, and potentially that's due to the fact that the Republicans have been quite disorganised, managing to get the stimulus bill through last month without too much fuss and pretty much the full amount that he wanted. So, I mean, you'd have to say that from that perspective that things look relatively hopeful, but I think the key risk this time is that the next round of stimulus, with that included, is huge, and I think it's something to be rolled out over 8 years or something like that. But the way he's planning on paying it is obviously hiking the corporate tax rate back up to 28%, and it would take about 15 years to pay that off. I think he'd be able to get it through with, just with Democrat votes alone. But whether or not those tax hikes are something that everyone would vote for or not means that this could be something that maybe takes a little bit longer to get through.
Yeah, and do you cut the spending because you can't get taxes to where you want them, or do you just spend it anyway and then almost make that the next administration's problem? Because he's not running a second term. I think he said that, or definitely he probably shouldn't be running a second term. So is that something that he can say, well, I saved the day, and that's for someone else to worry about?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like he's he's happy to spend, and with the backing of Janet Yellen, who seems to have the purse completely open, and also seems to be relatively aligned with the Fed, which is
hope so.
Which is a bit of a change since Trump, where they were obviously everything was a battle basically. So perhaps there's a good chance of getting that through.
I think from my perspective, Yellen is quite reassuring, right, because she's been there. She's been around government for so long. She's been head of the central bank. That would be seen as someone that really does know what the numbers mean. And if she says it's all right, then I think that's probably a good space. I mean, I still can't work out how you can finance that much of a deficit, but they've got that, I'm sure. We shall see. Look, I wanted to cover a couple of subjects. We've done that. We'll definitely be back for more. Thanks for your time and the contributions, and one of us will be right with something, I'm sure.
Thanks for having me, and great to see the face behind the morning report.
Not everyone will think that, but yeah, there we go. It's this.